Right. Good afternoon, Ashika. Hope you're okay. So, welcome to another session of HRM. Today we'll be looking at LO3, which is Learning Outcome 3, which is to look at the internal and external factors affecting the HRM decision making, including some elements of employment law, employment legislation. Okay. So, yesterday we were talking about, can you remember anything we were talking about yesterday? Anything that you were here yesterday?
Yeah.
We talked about, what did we talk about? We talked about
Motivation.
we talked about motivation theories, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember anything, any motivation theories or the writers on theories?
Yeah, there was a content theories and process theories. Content theory
Right.
talks about the Maslow's theory of needs, Alderfer's ERG theory.
Excellent. So Maslow's theory
And
of needs, hierarchy, right? Hierarchical theory of
hierarchy of needs.
Herzberg's X and Y theory, X and Y, Maslow's theory. We talked about Taylor. We gave him a name of Taylor. You can look at the scientific management. Yeah. You can look up Likkert's. You can look up other theories by other writers, right? And content theory, process theory, and so many other theories, right? What is the more?
Yes.
So we talked about the motivating factors. Why do people work? What do you think? Why do you want to work?
Because I want some money and social relationships.
Right. So do you want money?
Yeah.
Okay. How much?
As many as it can.
As much
possible.
as you. Okay. So for example, if you get £1 million today, what are you going to do with it?
Whatever my heart wants to do, I will do that.
You will do what?
Yeah.
What will you do with it?
Whatever my heart wants, I will do that.
Right. Okay. Whatever you have wants. Like what would you want, for example? Give me an example of what would you like to do with £1 million? Will you buy a house? Will you buy a car? Will you buy
a luxurious car?
Will you buy clothes? Will you buy a Rolls Royce? Right?
Yeah.
Can you drive?
Car and clothes.
Can you drive?
Yes.
Right. Once you've got that, then okay. So suppose you got all these things. What are you going to do then afterwards? You know, if you got these, then what? Are there any limits or are they unlimited?
No, they'll be limited.
Right. So people's needs, people's wants are unlimited, aren't they? People's needs, my needs are unlimited. I need this, 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 but can I get everything? No, I can't, because the resources are limited, right? So therefore, we've got to make a choice, and that choice is known as the opportunity cost. Okay. And opportunity cost is you give up one thing and you select the other one, which is most appropriate in the circumstances. Okay. So we can't have everything. So these are the things we can have. £1 million. Okay. What motivates to get £1 million? You'll probably work. You know, you'll get some money, but what afterwards? But then if people have got a lot of money, but they're still not happy because they don't have any friendship. So they would go for a friendship or social factors, right? And once they get the social factors, they want something else. And then once they get that and then get some, so there's no end, is it? So the motivation theories tell you why people do this, 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 and once they're satisfied, they just you know, reach a point where there's nothing else, like a self-actualization. So people's so these are the motivation theories tell you there is a limit as well. You know, once you achieve your goals, then there's nothing to achieve, and then you know, the end of the world, isn't it? Yeah. Once you climb the Mount Everest, is there any other mountain in the world that is highest to the Mount Everest? No. So that's the end, right? So that's known as self-actualization. So all these theories, they have limitation. They do talk about motivating factors, and then, so that's what we studied. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some internal and external factors affecting HR planning. We're going to look at the some kind of employee relations and the law, the legislation, some ethical and social responsibilities, including responsibilities of some kind of workplace representation or role of trade unions, or the role of legislation. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. So the HR planning, HR internal and external factors affecting the HR decision making, including employment legislation and internal and external factors. Right, that's what we're going to concentrate on today. Now, internal factors, including the HR planning. So there are a lot of internal factors, and there are a lot of external factors affecting HR planning. When we look at the internal factors, we're looking at the company's policies. For example, what is the company's policy? What's the company's objective? What's the company's strategic plan? What's the company's practices? How did the company grow, and where they want to go, right? Where are they heading? We need to look at the internal workforce assessment in terms of numbers, in terms of their skills, in terms of the IT, for example, or the practices that they have through, how much employees are there, recruitment and selection we talked about, right? How do the training, these are all internal factors affecting the manpower planning or HR planning, right? Changes to the firm's operations, for example, types and skills and workforce training, and their international operations, local operations, multinational operations, the level of profitability, increase or decrease in the workforce, increase of profits, terms and conditions of service, right? Terms and conditions of recruitment, management, what type of management is it? Is it old management or new management? And what's their practices, and what do they lead into? Staff turnover, labor turnover, in other words, recruitment and selection. All these internal factors, they affect the HR planning, right? Training, HR policies, practice, all these things we have considered. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that we, when we are planning, when we are looking at HR planning, the internal policies, internal practices, internal management, recruitment and selection, all these internal factors, they do affect planning. The second thing is we need to look at the external factors as well. Now, the external factors are the factors that are outside the control of an organization. The factors that are surrounding us outside our organization. So the factors like, for example, demographic change. Now, what we mean by demographic change is the labor, for example, how much is the world, or how much is the country's population? Demography, okay? Demography is to do with the study of population, right? Do you understand?
No.
Okay, demography, okay, or demographic change is the influence of the supply of labor in a particular country, the size of the population, the age of the population, the growth rate in the population, the distribution of population. Where do they live? Where do people live? Do they live in towns? Do they live in villages? Do they live in urban areas? Do they live in rural areas? Do they live in industrial cities? Do they live in remote villages, and so on? So this is, you study people, demography, okay, or demographic change is the change in the population, all right? So study of population, people, you study people. How much, for example, in Pakistan, how many people are in Pakistan? So they're about 225 million approximately, all right?
Yeah.
So these are the people, this is the, the number of people living in that particular country. In other countries, for example, in India, for example, in China, for example, in the UK, the different number of population, people, change. So the biggest population is China. Then the second population is in India. Now they have taken over China recently, last month or 2 months ago. Then you have other countries. So all these people who are living in the country, right? The number of people living in that particular country increase and decrease, depends on the birth rate and death rate of this country or every country. Some are young population, some is old population, some are increasing, some are decreasing due to marriage, due to old age, due to retirement. So people, number of people change in particular countries, right? So this is the study of people, study of population, all right? So when we are talking about the labor available, labor means the people who are available to work, all right? That's what we mean by labor. Okay, supply of labor means the number of people available and ready to work. For population, for example, from 18 upwards, right, or 16 upwards to about 65, maybe up to 70. The working population is known as the labor, available labor, all right? So it depends on the age, it depends on the birth rate, it depends on the death rates, it depends on the migration. Now, migration means people leaving the particular country, and emigration or immigration. Migration means the people move about, okay? So people go out and people come in. So for example, in the UK, when people go from UK to Australia to other countries, they are emigrating from this country to other countries. When people are coming from outside the UK, they are immigrating to this UK here, all right? So people coming here in the UK, they are immigrants. People who went from here, they are migrating. So these are movement of people coming in and out. So, okay, aging population. So this depends on a number of factors, okay? So the supply of labor depends on this labor number, and the more the people in the country, the more easy to get labor, and more easy to, for example, your labor rate may go down, okay? The labor rate, i.e. the how much you're going to pay, what's the salary, what's the level of wages you're going to pay. So if there is a lot of people who are of the labor age or the working age, then it depends on the amount of money that you're going to pay. So the shorter the labor, the higher the pay. The shorter the labor, the higher the wages, salary. The more people are available for work, then the rate of labor wages go down, okay? So it depends on the supply of labor. So you know this law of supply and demand. If there is a shortage of some particular product, then there is more demand for it, the price goes up. And if there is more of a supply of that particular product, the price goes down. Exactly the same with the labor, okay? So you need to know this. Then the second factor, external factor, depends on the social, cultural trends, i.e. How many women are available for work, how many men are available for work, what's their life work balance, i.e. Women, because they have to look after the children, they have to manage home, they have to go to work. So what's their and so as men as well these days, they also look after the house and they look after the children and they also go to work. So we need to know the work-life balance of these people, okay? Part-time work or full-time work or flexible work or fixed-term contract depends on the social cultural needs. Some people don't want to work full-time, and some people want to work full-time, and some people want to work part-time only, maybe a couple of hours a week, just to get social contact. As you know, motivation theory says people are wanting to go for social contact, so they'll go for a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of hours every day, right? They don't want full-time because might not work for them, because they have to look after the things and they want to enjoy life as well. So they're a couple of hours a week, so they go for social contract or social contact. Some people want to go for fixed term, some people go for full-time, some people go for evening work, some people, so it's flexible hours. So social culture trends, some people want to not work, some people have other commitments. So it depends on what are the labor social cultural trends alike. Okay. Third factor is technological change, i.e., what type of nature of employment depends on the nature of employment. It depends on the employment skills. For example, people who are good in IT, or people who are good in ICT, they can work from home, they can work from remote locations. So or they can go and work in the workplaces. So technological change has is an external factor affecting the nature of work and affecting the HR planning. Okay, so number 4 is the labor mobility, means how much labor is moving from towns to cities to villages and vice versa, right? What is the labor moving? Why are they moving? They are moving, number 1, occupational mobility, means people are moving because they can't get a job according to their own professions. They move around the country, right, from one city to another city because they can't get a job in their own hometown because of their qualifications are not needed there. All right. So, for example, doctors or engineers, for example, if he's living in a village, there's no factory, there's no engineering firm there. And people move from there because they don't get a job in the village, so they'll go to town to get a job. Do you understand? Occupational mobility. Okay, so occupational movement between occupations influenced by the level of education and training. So they've had a training and they can't get a job in their village or in their town or in their city. They move to another city, they move to another town, they move to another country, they move to another location. Okay, so that's occupational mobility. And geographical mobility is when they move different towns, and I'm saying, right? So occupational mobility is influenced by the level of education, and geographical mobility is affected by the movement of location. So you move from town to town or region to region or national to international and so on. And that will influence your wage rate, your labor environment, influenced by the attractiveness of regions in terms of environment, climate, infrastructure, communication, wage rate, and so on. Another external factor that affects labor or HR planning depends on the state of the economy. Now, if the state of the economy is good, then that will have an impact on the labor availability. It will have an impact on the wages. It will have an impact on the what you call the salaries, right? And if the if the company or if the organization or if the economy is in full state of affairs, they want other people to come to work for them. They have to hire people at a higher salary because there's no everybody's full, right? There's no unemployment. Everybody in the country is fully employed. So in order to attract more, right, you have to offer them higher wages. But if the state of the economy is in a recession, i.e. there's unemployment, there's people not working, then you pay them less wages because there's a lot of people available for work. And if you have left one person from your job, then there is already second available and a third available. So you can afford to bring cheaper labor. Okay. So it depends on the state of the economy. Sometimes the economy is in full employment. Sometimes the economy is not in full employment. When it's in full employment, you try and pay higher wages because there's more demand, and you pay less wages when there's low demand. You understand? Okay. So it depends on the state of the economy. And number 6, the external factor, it depends on the law, the legislation, the regulation in a country. What's the structure of a workforce? What's the law protecting people in that particular country or economy? Okay, so these are some of the factors that are important when we are talking about the HR planning. So there are internal factors and there are external factors. Okay, so external factors like availability of labor, the state of economy, the skills, the labor availability, the skills, the education, training, IT, and so on and so forth. The internal factors affecting the HR planning depends on the management, the internal recruitment and selection, okay, the policies and practices of the organization and other factors, all right? So the last thing, okay, so let's look at the legislation. Okay, legislation means a law, employment law affecting the country, okay, in HR planning. So the facts number 6, this is quite an important factor. So we'll do that in detail, okay? Now, employment legislation is the area of law that affects regulating a country, or a regulation and functioning of relationship between employers and employee in an organizational context. It's a law, the employment law, it regulates rights of employees. It looks at the expectations of employers from the employee side as well as from their side. The law looks at the duties of employers towards ensuring a safe and suitable working conditions. Okay. Now, when we look at the employment legislation, this person, Bassanini, he says that the primary objective of employee legislation is to have a well-defined law so that there is no scope of ambiguity related to the relationship between employer and employee. Now, scope of ambiguity means confusion. Okay, so Bassanini, he says the employment legislation is, the main objective of this is to have a written down, document so that it's not confusing for everybody, right? Employees and employers are clear what to do, okay? What to do and when to do and how to do. So this means, for the employee, that they are aware of their rights. The employees are, there. The employment law gives them the right to know what their rights are. And employers also have the right, they have a clear idea what their responsibilities are, okay? So that everybody is clear who is responsible for what, when, what to do and how to do. And, the employees are clear and the employers are clear what their responsibilities. You understand? Okay.
Yeah.
Deacon and Morris, this is another author. These are the other people. Deacon and Morris, they also note that the employment legislation doesn't strictly dictate the terms of employment, but is a combination of both voluntary as well as legal measures to ensure an amicable working environment for both parties. What they're saying here is when people, employees and employers come together, they are there and they meet each other and design some kind of a document, right, whereby they both agree to do something, and which is, agreeable by both of these people. Okay, so this is very important. They design the document whereby they both agree and to do what they need to do. Okay, the objective of these measures, or the objective of these voluntary agreement, or these objective of the voluntary as well as legal measures is number one. Okay, first of all, they say that it's the legislation influences the functions of the management in the way they exercise control and manage the workforce in the organization. What they're saying here is, number one, the legislation, the law tells us what's the management's duty. How can they control and people in their workforce, right? What's their rights? What's their obligations? How can they manage the workforce in the organization? Okay, because the law clearly lays down some kind of rules and regulations, when to hire, how many, when to fire, okay, when to take some kind of measurements against employee, and so on. Okay, so this is what they are saying. Okay, and the way this can be done is by collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a term that is used by employers and employees when they are negotiating their when they're dealing with the trade unions. Now, the trade unions are people who represent the interests of workers. Okay, and these workers are members of the trade union, whereby they pay some subscription to this body. And if there's a problem between employer and employee, these trade unions represent the employees and take them to tribunals, take them to the court, advise them about employees' rights, and so on. Okay, so this is very important, that the trade unions represent the need and interests of employees. Okay, and they work for the interests of employees. Okay, so what they are saying is collective bargaining is important, because when they come to work, there may be disagreements, and these disagreements can be resolved by mutual understanding. Okay, right. For example, legislation tells you about the guidelines of national minimum wage. So one person who is working in any organization, they have to be paid national minimum wage. If they don't, then they are breaking the law. They can be taken to court, they can be sued, and they can be fined, they can be done for breaking the law. Okay, and trade union can help you to take the court action and represent you. All right. Secondly, what they're saying is the legislation or the law or the legal the help is there in enforcing certain principles such as equal treatment, safe working conditions, avoidance of discrimination, so on. What they are saying is the second objective of the legal or legislation or the law is to help people get their equal rights. You can't be discriminated if you are working in an organization between two people. You can't be discriminated against one another, right? Discrimination means you can't be treated less favorably than another group or another person or another gender or another, in terms of safe working conditions, in terms of training, in terms of promotion, in terms of wages. You can't be treated less than any other person. You should be treated equally. All right. So this is what they're saying. The legislation treats everybody the same. You can't have two people treated differently. All right, under the legislation. If it do, then it's illegal. Then you can be, the employers will be able to be sued. They can go, they can be done for it. They can be fined, and they can be taken to court for this, breaking these laws. All right. So for example, if you break, for example, if an employer doesn't provide you safe working conditions, or he doesn't give you the rights under the employment contract, or he doesn't give you the minimum wage, then you have the right to sue the employers and get compensation out to them. Okay. So this is the basically, and we are talking about employment legislation. This is what legislation does. It gives you the right to employee, and it also sets obligations on employers. What's the responsibility of employee? What's the job of the employers? Who has to do what? Okay. And if nobody breaks the law, then they're fine. If they break the law, then they'll be taken to court, and then they'll get problems. All right. What's the role of contracts in employment law? So let's look at the role of contracts. Now, what are contracts? I'm sure you know about the contracts. When everybody gets a job, when people go for a job in a companies or in organizations, they have to have a kind of a contract. A contract is a written document which lays your name and obligation and the duties and the salaries and the term of employment and so on and so forth, and the right of obligations from the employer, and they lay out, and both parties sign those contracts, or they sign the document, date it, stamp it, and employer and employee keep copy of the contract each. Okay, this contract is an obligation. It's a legal document which is required by employment law. It's got to be given, which deals with various activities related to employment. So in the UK, employment law is a statutory law which deals with various activities related to law. Okay, and the contract is a document that begins when an employment is offered to that particular applicant. When they sign it, they get the issue of a contract. They have to sign and they have to abide by that contract. Now, this term of contract, the contract of employment, includes things like salary, how much salary you're going to get, okay, offered by the employer. It looks at, it gives you the right of employment, term of employment. You know, is it a permanent? Is it a part-time? Is it a full-time? What type of working hours will it include? What's the payment like? What's the holidays like? It includes like, is there any health insurance included in it? Is there any pension rights? Is it any paid holidays? Any, you know, anything like when one person can be fired from a job, for example, when, right, reason for termination, in other words, what are the policies, what are the practices in the organization, what type of training will they require, what are education do they have, everything to do with the job. Okay, so this term of contract has everything to do with the nature of the job, right? So it's a document, it's a document that contains everything related to the particular job. All right, and if you don't get this contract, you should ask for one. You should ask from your employer, can I have my contract of employment, please? And if there is no contract, then of course, you know, it should be drawn up. It should be made available to the employee. Okay, if the employer doesn't give the employee a contract of employment, then of course they can, you know, ask, or maybe they can ask for legal advice on it. Why didn't he get one? Okay. Now, the purpose of the contract of employment is, number one, for example, it's a contract which lays out your duties, your rights, your obligations as an employee. All right. As a result, much of the ambiguity is reduced, so that nobody is confused. Everything is laid down by the law, everything laid down by the contract of employment. There is no confusion, there's no ambiguity, it's a very clear cut. And when there is a problem, when there is a dispute, you can refer to the contract of employment in terms of problems, in terms of difficulties, in terms of when the relationship breaks down between an employer and employee, right? You can refer to the contract. Okay. Secondly, the contract of employment is different for different businesses, and then different rights and different obligations. So, for example, a duty of a doctor is completely different to a duty of a teacher, or a teacher is different to a nurse. Okay, so they will get different contracts because they're different occupations. And people who are in labor, for example, they have a different types of contract, or daily contract, or daily wages, different types of rights and different types of obligation on employment or employers, right? Okay, and thirdly, the contract is not unilateral, i.e. it's not one-sided. Okay, it's not one-sided contract. Both, it relates to both parties. Both parties must sign the contract. If only one party signs the contract, it's not valid. It's not enforceable. Okay, so it's got to be signed by both of them. Unilateral means one person. One person cannot, or one side. So the contract's got to be multi. Okay, signed by both. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what the contract serves, this serves different purposes. Now, the contract serves, for example, looks at the minimum wage rate under the National Minimum Wage Act 1998. Okay, so the contract lays down specifically what's the wages, minimum wage or salary or whatever. So it lays down the right to be paid, holidays got to be paid, leave from work under the work time regulation 1998. It lays down the right of flexible working conditions, flexible working patterns. Everybody has the right to be working, have a right to flexible working conditions, because if you don't want to work full time, tell the employer, I'm not really happy working full time. I need a bit of time off. I need to be given a chance to work flexible hours, and they have to, what you call them, they have to oblige. Okay, they have to give you this. If they say we can't, then they are, you know, doing something wrong. Okay, so everybody has the right the contract of employment gives you the right for flexible working patterns, because people have different needs. People have sometimes they have to take some work off because the children, they need to look after the children, they take to schools, people are sick, people have and they had to have work from home, or for example, they want to look after the house and so on, or maybe the mother is sick and they got to look after the mother at home. So who's going to manage this if they're working full-time all the time? There's nobody else. So they've got to have the right to have this the right. Then they have also basic occupational pension under the Pensions Act, so they've got to have some kind of a pension rights. For the employers, an employment contract covers the protection for instance. So employers have the right to be protected against stealing, for example. The protection they have, employers, when they give you a job and the employee is working there, the employers must be protected against their rights for intellectual property, for example, legal obligations to protect the rights of employers, i.e. maybe they have some kind of inventions, maybe they have kind of patents, maybe they have some kind of copyrights, maybe they have some kind of products, unique products, and employees cannot go out and tell tell somebody from outside, this is the product these employers are producing, and this is how they produce, and this is how they can't leak their secrets, in other words. All right, so this is an obligation employees have from not to break secrets of their employer, not to tell other competitors about their employers, right? So otherwise, if they do that, then they are breaking the contract. The employees will be sued, right? Do you understand? So the employers have to be protected against that. And one advantage of the contract of employment is when we have a contract of employment, both parties are clear. Both parties are certain what to do. They know what their obligations and they know their duties. Okay. As a result, employees cannot ask for something that they have broken the contract, and they cannot be asking for something unreasonable. For example, if they can't, if they've signed a contract and they're asking for unreasonable wage or unreasonable demands, they can't do that because they have signed an agreement. And if they have broken the agreement, then they are responsible for themselves. Okay, so the employees got to be aware of these. Another advantage of having a contract of employment is that employees can enter into the contract with full knowledge of the terms and conditions offered by the employer, and the agreement is also supported by law. So they both know, the employee knows what he's signing. He should have a full knowledge of the terms and conditions, what he's going in for, okay, and what's the employer offering. And when they sign, that means they have the protection of law as well. Okay, so the employee can choose, to enter into contract, or they cannot. It depends on them. There's nobody forcing them to sign the contract. It's a voluntary agreement. Once they've done it, then the law steps in, and then both sides are protected by the law. Okay, so that's why this law is very important when we talk about the legislation. And the UK has a very complicated employment law, and it protects employee and employer at all stages. Okay. Friedland and other party, or Friedland and other writers, they say one of the biggest benefits of contract of employment for the employers is that employers can protect their trade secrets, especially in situations where employees working with confidential data of the organization. Okay, so these people saying that employers are protected under the contract of employment because they have some trade secrets. For example, if you're working for the government, and or if you're working for an employer, if you're working for Google, if you're working for pharmaceutical industry, for example, companies, then they have a lot of patents, they have a lot of research, they have a lot of development, a lot of products under research and development. Employees can't go and disclose these secrets to somebody else, because otherwise, if they sell these secrets to third parties, then of course they are damaging the reputation of employers. Okay, so they've got to be, the employers have the right to be protected against all this. Okay, so confidential data, or for example, if an employee is selling data to the other employers regarding training and development policies or any other personal data of employees in this particular country or in this particular organization, they, these people have a lot of, high caliber employees in particular organization. They cannot sell their data to another because that's against the contract, and people will get sued for this. Okay, so you have to sign the contract, so not to disclose. If you're working in government organizations, for example, in secret agency or and atomic energy or in police, and you have to, can't disclose secrets to other. So the law protects them. Okay. And if, right, McDonald and Macon noted that if the employees does not turn out as was desired in the requirements of the organizational change, the employer will have to renegotiate. However, sometimes when you sign a contract, then a person who said, I have this qualification, I have this training experience, I have this, but when they come to the job, they can't do the job, then the employer has the right to renegotiate the contract, okay, which may often involve different rules like training and retraining and, going through development, going through different steps. So that's a quite lengthy, lengthy hurdle. So must make sure that one employee and employer are engaging, they are engaging with the right, what they're letting themselves in. Otherwise, the legal hoops, legal hurdles are quite difficult ones to get through. And then both parties will be struggling to get rid of an employee when they are not up to standard. Okay. Now, second one is when there is a breach of contract, the employer may also have to face legal actions or legal hurdles. So therefore, this is why the contract is there, to protect both of these people, to protect each other. Okay. And it's very important that these organizations, or they enter into agreement with full knowledge, full active mind, and so that the both parties are protected. Okay. Any question?
No.
Right, you're okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay. There are different labor laws in England. There are many laws in the UK that have that protect people, that protect employers and employees. Okay, law is very complicated. Legislation is very thorough and very detailed on all aspects of employment in the UK. One of the laws, for example, is the Equality Acts 2010. Equality Acts means where everybody is treated equally, okay? Equal rights to red, yellow, green, black, white, man, woman, disabled, able, right? Gay, homosexual, lesbian, pregnant, non-pregnant, anything, right? So this equality law, Equality Act, determines equal employment opportunities for all people, irrespective of their age, religion, gender, disability, background, right? Religion, race, color, doesn't matter. You're married, you're unmarried, it doesn't discriminate. Do you understand? So Equality Law 2010 lays down specifically that everybody should be, or everybody is treated equally under the employment opportunities under the Equal Act. Another law is the European Convention on Human Rights, for example. Now, this law, this is a legal body, a European Convention on Human Rights. This is a designed by the European Union, because the UK was a part of the European Union. They signed the Convention on Human Rights. Now, what it does is hears cases about the human rights violation. Their main obligation is to hear cases when the rights of people have been broken, when they've been not given. Organizations, when they are registered in the UK, they must ensure that there are no violations on human rights to the employees within the organization, and should accordingly create awareness within the organization, i.e. They should tell these people that you will be treated equally, you will be treated not favorably, and if their rights and obligations are broken, they are free to take organization, their employer, to human rights courts, okay? And they'll be sued. So that's their employee has a right to take their employer to the human rights court. European Convention on Human Rights gives them the right, and they'll be sued upon if they are not given their rights, okay? If they are discriminated against, say, employment, or if only when the courts in the UK haven't heard their cases, when they've not been given the right by the UK courts, then the last hurdle is to take the court case to the human rights. Do you understand? No, otherwise, they can't just take the court case to the human rights in the first instance. No, the last resort, the last step, when the employee has, is to take the people or employee has.
I'm not getting this one.
Okay, so the employee has the right to take their employer to the court. What I'm saying, for example, if you are an employee, yeah, and you don't get the right, you don't get the equal rights as to a white person, as to another employee, right? Because you are a woman, because you are from a different nationality, or from you are different color, or from a different religion, and you are paid less wages than the second other person, then you have the right to take the employer to court. You have the right to sue them, okay? And if they still don't give you the same rights, then you go through different hurdles. The last hurdle, last court of action is the Human Rights Court, okay? You can take the case to the European Human Rights Court, and you take the case there. They will hear the case, then they will decide, okay?
Okay.
So this is what I'm saying, the Human Rights Convention on Human Rights, European Convention on Human Rights. Every person in the UK who is working, they have the right to take the court case to human rights when their basic rights are not being given by the employer, okay? And the courts didn't give him the right. But first you have to explore the domestic courts. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. If the domestic courts haven't given you the right, then of course the last resort is to go to the European Convention. For example, this company, EY, honors the European Convention on Human Rights, and an awareness session is given to the employers during the introduction session when they are on board with the company, i.e. the EY is a fictitious company, right? When somebody joins them as an employee, they are under obligation to tell the employer, to tell the employee in a session that you have these rights, okay? That you have these rights and you don't have these rights, for example, okay? So employers have the right to tell them. The third legislation, okay, the third legislation we have in the UK, for example, amongst the many other legislation on the employment law, is the Working Time Regulation 1998. Now this is an act of Parliament which defines the basic average working hours for the employee and stipulates the rest breaks, for example, and the right to be paid annual leaves. What it does is says working time, how much time you got to be at work, for example. What's the rest break? How many breaks will you get? 15 minutes. How many breaks during the day will you get? Rest break. How many annual leave will you get? Okay. So this stipulates your basic working hours, right? Some, yeah, maybe these days is normal working hours is 37.5 hours in the UK, because 5 days you have 7.5 working hours per day, which is 37.5 in a week. 5 days a week multiplied by 7.5, 37.5 hours a week. Then you have the right of a break, half an hour lunchtime for every day, maybe another 10-15 minutes for break, for tea breaks, okay? And that's the right that every employee has in, okay? So, for example, EY ensures that this company provides good atmosphere in an organization. They have provided minimum, they provide minimum 28 days annual leave, paid leave to employees. right? They pay them with wages. So therefore, they give their employees the right to have breaks. They give them minimum 28 days paid holidays, and because that's an under obligation, that's by legal obligation to do that. Okay. Another legislation that we need or we're talking about is the Employment Rights Act 1996. Now, this act covers under the Employment Act, it looks at different different practices, different contracts, okay, different conditions, different terms and conditions. It looks at, for example, number one, employment particulars under Part 1. Now, under Part 1 looks at the employment contracts. It looks at the terms and conditions of the contract. It looks at other other employment particulars. Okay, another Employment Rights Act looks at the disclosures and determinant under the Public Interest Disclosures Act. It looks at the parts 4A and 5 disclosures, i.e. what type of information need to be disclosed to other parties regarding employment and what should not be disclosed, right? It looks at the paid time off work for employees, i.e. for training, for development, for a new kind of updating their skills, right? So employees have the right to have a time off for work development, continuous development, or continuous professional development, right? Because it's under obligation. Everybody got to have a upskilling. Everybody, employee, have the right to be upskilled all the time, because technology changes, because the circumstances change, because the skills level change, requirements of employers change. So everybody has to have some kind of training, okay, paid training, health and safety training, for example, continuous professional development training, upskilling, new courses, and so on, so they can keep up pace with the new developments in work. Okay, you understand? Employment laws gives them the right to have this time off.
Yes.
Employment rights gives the employees protection against wrongful dismissal, i.e. employees cannot be dismissed just like this because I don't like you, because you're no good, or your color is such and such. They can't dismiss you without giving you proof, without giving you proper reason, without without writing. They can't say verbally you are sacked. No, that's illegal. Okay, they have to have some kind of a written document why, okay, valid reason under this particular Dismissals and Notice Reasons Act. Okay, people have the right to be protected against their unfair dismissal by employment under unfair dismissal. Okay, they have the law gives people right not to be made redundant unless the job doesn't exist anymore. Okay, or if the job becomes old, or is become obsolete, or it's no longer in existence, or you don't have the job anymore because the very old, you established that job 50 years ago and now you don't need it. So you can make people redundant provided you don't have any job and you don't have anything to do, but employers have still the obligations to redeploy people in a suitable position. Okay, the protection, the law also gives you the right or compensation for employees in case of bankruptcy of the organization. So if the company goes bankrupt, then the employer has to have given you some kind of compensation, money compensation for dismissing or for laying off because you've gone bankrupt, right, under the Insolvency Act. So you've got to get some money back of them. Okay, so for example, at AY or at EY, this is a company, these provisions of the Employment Act 1996 for the employees are covered for the employees, and any breaches in these rights can be taken up with senior management where the grievances of the employees are adequately addressed. What it means, if you don't agree with the company, you can take up with the management, talk to them, discuss it with them, take it with them, and then they'll of course definitely listen to you. If the management doesn't listen, then of course the legal obligation, then you can take other action. Okay, so first point of contact is talk to the management, and then when they agree, no problem. But if they don't agree, then you take the advice of the law, then you protected by the law. All right. Health and Safety at Works Act. This is very important under the Health and Safety at Works Act 1974. Now, this act allows, this act gives you the right to have safe working conditions. Every employer must give safe working conditions to their employee, right? If they're not, then they are breaking the law, okay? And if they are breaking the law, then they'll be taken to court, be fined. They've got to put the policies right, they've got to put the practices right. Until they put them right, they will be still under the watch of the dog, under the watch of the, under the eye of the law. Okay, so the health and safety at work is provided by the employer. So good conditions, lighting, heating, proper computer, proper chairs, table, right ties, okay, proper training, proper equipment to do the work, safe environment, lighting, heating, all the environmental conditions should be this very safe, very tidy, so that the, making sure that the employees are very safe at work. Otherwise, if they're not safe, there is, problems in the workplace, then the employers got to put them right, okay? Because they have to do it by law. If they don't, then they are breaking law, and they can be sued heavily. They can be sued tremendously. What are the, what are these conditions? What are these environmental working conditions? Number one, for example, they will include, for example, right of the cleaning work environment, right to clean work environment. For example, looking at the cleaning conditions of the workplace, making sure that the bathrooms are cleaned, for example, making sure that you've got fire exits, making sure that there are clear fire exits marked clearly, making sure that the environment, work desk place is clear, clean, adequate number of fire extinguishers, making sure that there's nothing on the floor which causes accidents to people in the offices or to the factory or to the people walking about, making sure that the dustbins are clean and clear, otherwise the hygienic issues, making sure that there are drills, periodic drills for evacuation, making sure that the safety and health and working conditions of the offices are taking place regularly, making sure that the fire extinguishers are not on the floor, but they are hanged on the walls, making sure that the, all these training materials and all these accidents are recorded in the particular register, right? So all these, there is also a health and safety officer, maybe in a bigger organization, must make sure that there is all this type of, and there are many other obligations that under the Health and Safety at Works Act, the employers have to have. Otherwise, if they are breaking any of these health and safety issues, then they'll be done for it, okay? They'll be taken to court. These regularly, these workplaces are inspected by the Inspectorate of Health and Safety, okay? The Inspectorate are very rigorous, very thorough, they're very strict, okay? So these inspectors regularly visit workplaces under the Health and Safety at Works Act, okay? So it's very important that employers lay down these principles of Health and Safety at Works Act, and the law asks them to display, to show the a proper act on a particular display. They should have a display of act on the wall, the wall, and everybody has the right to read, or everybody has the access to read that particular document, and they should be displayed on the wall, okay? So are we okay on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very important. So what we've talked today is we looked at internal and external factors. We looked at the human resource planning, okay? Internal factors and external factors. If you go back to your LO3, we looked at the external and internal factors affecting HR policies, HR decision making, including the internal factors like the practices and policies of the organization, like the strategic objectives or the strategic plan, okay, or practices inside the organization. We must recruitment and selection, objectives, yeah, vision. It's got to be all in that particular direction. And externally, you've got to have be these employment factors are protected by the external factors like the legislation, like the laws, like the changes in technology, for example, like the labor changes in labor movement, changes in demographic change, for example, okay, or socio-cultural change, and so, or technological change. So all these factors help in to plan for HR planning, okay? So these are very important factors. That's what we have considered today, and the legislation we also looked at, okay? So you can look at further reading. You have to go on to do your reading on Moodle, for example. You can look at the different different reading texts. One of the texts is on knowledgebank.kaplan.co.uk, and chapter of 15, strategy and people. You can read that. You can look at the Moodle reading materials. You can look at your external reading research, okay? So therefore, it's very important that you do your reading, okay? And when you are doing reading, we need to look at the terms like job design, motivational theories, training development, motivation, internal and external factors affecting HR planning, and so on, okay?
Okay. And Moodle?
There are references. You can look up at these references, go and look at these books, e-books, Armstrong or Torrington and Chapman, or Torrington Tal, Human Resource Management, right, or CIPD, which is a Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development website, and you can look for your own resources as well, okay? So you were going to ask me a question.
In Moodle, LO3 is not available.
Which one is not available?
LO3.
Is it not available?
Of Human Resource Management, yeah.
Okay, if not available, I'll send you, give me your email, I'll send it to you now.
Okay.
Okay, so please write me your email on the message, and I'll post it to you now. Okay, any other question?
No.
Are you okay what we've done today?
Yes.
Okay, then we thank you for joining, and we will see you, is it next week? LO4?
Okay.
Yes, I think it's next week, Saturday and Sunday next week. Okay.
Okay.
Any other question, or you're okay with now?
No, I'm okay.
Thank you very much for joining, and we'll speak to you. So don't forget to send me your email, please. Finished, then I will send you the LO3 on this. All right.
On WhatsApp, I send you my email.
No, you can send me just on message here. You just write your email here, and I'll note it down.
Chat?
Yes. And in this message, you just message me in the chat, in the chat box. All right. Are you writing?
Yeah.
Ishika 643.
Ashika K.
Ishika K 643 at Gmail, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send you
just now, Ishika.
Okay, right? Okay, thank you very much, Ishika. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.